Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. I'm Christian Harris, the founder of Slip Safety Services. This is another of my Sliptember series of slip and fall related podcasts, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Joesph of Liberty Mutual Insurance in the US. As we'll hear about, Amber is a real specialist on slip and fall, like me, a fellow slip and fall geek. So it's always good when we can find a couple of us to have a chat. There aren't that many of us around, so getting two of us together is a real treat for us, and hopefully you'll agree for you guys as well. Just learned really about what Liberty Mutual are doing. We talked a bit about the size of the slip and fall problem in the US, some of the insurance claim trends where the payouts are rising to some scary levels actually, which is interesting, and what that means in terms of the impact it has on the cost to businesses and premiums and things going forward. We talked a lot about the need for a holistic approach to solving the slip and fall problem, which is something that I bang on about a lot, and Amber shares that passion as well. So I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this one. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure you will too. Please do jump on board and support Sliptember. Get involved in a social media campaign that we're running. Like, comment, share. Really do appreciate that. The goal is to raise awareness about the importance of slip and fall, and actually around some of the preventative measures that can be taken. And indeed, Amber talked us through a couple of case studies of where she and her team have successfully done that and saved clients in the US large sums of money through being more proactive and trying to prevent slips and falls from happening in the first place. Let's crack on then and join the conversation with myself and Amber Joesph. Hope you enjoy it, and wishing you all a happy Sliptember. Amber, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Christian. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Nice of you to join me. What is it? What time is it for you now?
It is 11:30 in the morning, Eastern time.
That's fine then. That's easy.
This is early. It's the start to my Friday, the end to your Friday.
Yes, I'm looking to set up a podcast. I don't know if this is going to work, with someone from Tokyo and someone from Toronto.
Wow.
So I think that means that I'm going to have to do like 11 p.m. and then
probably
it would be, I think, 7 a.m. in Tokyo and 6 p.m. in Toronto or something like that. And that's probably the easiest combination of time zones.
Yep.
Not ideal, but there we go. It's all in the duty of raising awareness about slips and falls.
Exactly.
That's
with the upcoming Sliptember, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's how passionate I am about slips and falls. So yes, no, this is going to be a Sliptember episode as well of the podcast. I'm doing a special Sliptember series. So you're one of my honoured guests for Sliptember.
I appreciate that, and I'm excited to be here because, as you know, slips and falls is also my passion, and it's what I love to do.
Exactly, yeah. Why don't you start by giving us a bit of background in terms of know who you are, what you do, and how you came to be in this this position and having this shared passion with me.
Yeah, so I started off, I guess, kind of where it came from. I graduated from Pennsylvania State University, with a civil and environmental engineering degree. From there, I had a degree, but I didn't go into engineering. I heard about an insurance company, which was Liberty Mutual Insurance Company. And I'm like, all right, what do they have to offer? And one of the big things that I saw was their creed of helping people live safer, more secure lives. And really, I always knew I wanted to help people and do so. So what I did is I interviewed for the job. I got the job and I have been with the company for 18 years. Over the course of that 18 years, I've had an opportunity to work across all industries, all markets, do a whole bunch of things outside of slips and falls. But slips and falls was my passion. And really in the last 10 years, I started focusing more on the technical side of slips, trips, and falls, or as we call it here at Liberty Mutual, Tribology. And one of the things, as I did that, I started getting more engaged with different standards committees. So I'm an active member right now of the ASTM F13 Standard Committee, and that's for pedestrian walkway safety and footwear. I'm also a co-chair on one of a committee right now. We're writing a new standard where we're looking at a guide for premises design, considering snow and ice management. So really looking at the preventative side of it before an accident can happen. So how can we design things out? And I'm also part of, in that course of the technical expertise, I'm part of the National Safety Council as a delegate on their board, and really helping them support their mission and their maturity models. And my focus for being there is the slips, trips, and falls to bring that aspect to them, especially with employee safety.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, and probably, well, I guess it was back in May, I received a promotion, and one of the things that we do in my role now as a product director is I'm helping to build strategy for our company. So we have across the board about 380 plus consultants in the United States. And with that, we provide service across all industries. So, my goal is to help build a strategy focusing on both tribology and then also general liability. So when we look at that, Slips and Falls runs across all lines of business, across workers' comp, across general liability. So they really pair well together.
Yeah.
And with that, it also helps me showcase externally, what we have to offer as an organization. I'm really confident in our consultants and how we move forward. And I'm really looking forward to see where the next 5-10 years can go with Slips and Falls, and how we can change the thought process on the way people look at slips and falls.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of one of the key focuses, as you know, that I share. And that's, why I'm doing Sliptember, really to try and raise some awareness here. It's really interesting that not you, but your role exists, because there's nothing like that here in the UK. I know we're a much smaller market. There's, what are we, a sort of 1/7 of the size of the US in terms of population size. But is that focus and that specialism something that it's only really Liberty that are doing, or are there similar people to you and other insurers, to your knowledge?
Yeah, so there are others. So there are other insurance carriers, and then within those insurance carriers, some of them do have counterparts like myself in those roles. I will say, though, that Liberty Mutual is by far one of the most driven organization when it comes to prevention and partnering with our customers. You could probably ask anybody, but we have one of the most robust safety and health consultants and offerings for our customers. So while they do, I don't know if they stand up to where we're at. Being kind of biased, but
yeah, no, of course, it's great to see, because what we see here in the UK is risk control or loss prevention, or whatever you call them, risk management. But you tend to have a motor specialist person or people, and then you have liability specialists, but you don't go that level down into having a manual handling specialist or a slip and fall specialist or whatever. So it's really interesting to see that. Now, the first thing we were going to do was just try and put a bit of context around this, and you sent me some slides. So if you're listening to this, apologies that you can't see the slides, but you can download them, and I'll put them on the show notes. But this is really just to try and set the scene a little bit in terms of what's going on in the US and the size of the slip and fall problem, and some of the work that you do. So I don't know if you want to sort of dive into this and talk through some of this data and information.
Yep. So this is also talking a little bit about Liberty Mutual as an organization. So our global risk solutions, I mean, we truly are a global company. When we look about how we handle our customers and insurance in general, $44 billion in global insurance company. We're a Fortune 100 company. We're the fourth largest P&C carrier in the United States. So just to kind of give you a breadth of knowledge and like the size of customers that we deal with, I could be dealing with a customer from a premium size of 150,000 on up to millions of dollars, and where they have their own retention. So we really run the gamut on how we help customers, because we have to be able to balance where they're at in their programs. So just kind of going from left to right on the screen, if you look at from a liability trending, so 10 trends risk impacting general liability. So when we look at liability, I look at like guest slips and falls, customer slips and falls to the site, and that's truly where that is. One of the big things that we're seeing within the slips and falls exposure or loss area is something called nuclear verdicts here in the United States.
Right.
I don't think you have that within the UK, but really what happens, something called social inflation. It's basically a rise in tort litigation from changes in legal theories. It's really people shifting their attitudes on how they're feeling about our government and how the way things are being handled them. They're basically feeling that the system is failing them. So it's really hard to predict verdicts when claims actually do go to court. It's a lot of that's driven by like corporate mistrust. People want to teach the corporations a lesson. They want to discourage any future like negative behaviors that are occurring. And then there's really some sort of like social pessimism going on, right? So really, along with that, on the liability side, we're seeing where you might have a slip and fall claim before, maybe, $150,000, $100,000 on the liability side. Now we're seeing claims 2.5 million, 16 million, 18 million.
Wow.
And it's getting, that's what we're calling those nuclear verdicts, or the shock loss potential. And we're seeing more and more of them consistently. So for slips and falls, it really truly needs to be a focal point here for any business and what they're doing. You can see, so if you look from the left down, if you go down the 10 trends for hospitality, everybody knows what hospitality is, restaurants, retail. When you look at that, you could see customer lawsuits as number 7 there. Slips, falls cause 50% of claims costs. So it's in every industry, and it really drives the case. And I'm not going to really talk too much more about those, but if you flip to the next slide, this is for worker injury. So Liberty Mutual every year puts out a workplace safety index. This is our 2021 index. And really what it does, it ranks the top 10 loss drivers in terms of cost and the percentage, so frequency of claims. And if you look, the first one is overexertion, really, which is your ergonomics, right? The lifting, lowering, pushing, pulling type stuff. But if you combined number 2 and number 7, it's really a total of $12.83 billion in cost, and 22.6% in the total percentage of claims. So really, slips and falls, when you look at falls on same level and slips or trip without a fall, those two combined really are pretty darn close to the overexertion for employee risk factors. So there's no doubt across all lines that we're having an issue, and we need to impact that issue. And we have to get people to realize it's not just something that happens. There's a risk factor there, and we need to do better at addressing that as a whole.
Yeah, fully agree with you there, and some really interesting stats. The nuclear claims or nuclear settlements,
nuclear verdicts, they call them.
Nuclear verdicts, yeah. I mean that you're right. That doesn't really exist here, because we have a system where kind of, if you lose a finger, it's worth X pounds, and if you lose a thumb, it's worth Y pounds, and so it's all kind of quite mathematically added up. And the premise is really to put the claimant back to the position that they were in before the accident happened. We don't have the sort of punitive damages. So that's kind of one lucky thing here. But I mean, some of those numbers were really kind of shocking, because if you look in the UK, the average claim cost for a slip and fall is around £10,000. Of course, we have some very, very big ones. We have a lot that are a lot lower, but you don't see that many that are in the millions. Whereas what you're saying is that, you know, that is starting to happen more and more over in the US.
Yes, it's definitely a trend. And, you know, until something's done about it, really, we're just going to continue to see those, because the shift in the culture, really, and the shift in people's feelings towards corporations as a whole. And really, they feel that they have deep pockets and they're looking for that ultimate payout. We're a very litigious society here in the United States. I say that all the time. And unfortunately, sometimes these verdicts end up in the high cost dollars, and it really isn't good overall.
No,
So we
because
really
that's
need
also
to do
going to,
something.
yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, because that's also going to drive higher settlements before court as well, isn't it? Because now if people know there's a chance they might get 2 million, that, you know, they're not going to accept 50,000 out of court before it goes to trial, you know, and that's going to start pushing all of that up, and that's going to have a big knock-on effect on premiums that people are going to have to pay.
Yep. And on top of it, the lawyers are kind of catching on now, and they're doing something called litigation funding, where they're actually funding the cost up front. So the plaintiff doesn't really even have to worry about the cost until afterwards, especially if they know they're going to receive some sort of big settlement from it. So it's just, there's a lot of things and factors going into it that kind of are driving some of that elevated cost, or those nuclear verdicts, as they call them.
Yeah. We have had an issue with that, with this kind of no win, no fee system. So if you took on a case, if the lawyer took on your case but you didn't win, then you wouldn't have to pay them anything. They'd basically insure themselves or self-fund or whatever. So from a claimant perspective, there was no risk of, you know, pursuing the claim and then you lose the claim and then you're hit with a big legal bill, as long as you don't obviously lie or whatever, you know, as long as you're truthful about what you're saying. And that has been a problem here for us as well. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting how these things differ and different sides of the pond. So what, I mean, you're clearly a subject matter expert on this, and you know, I don't know if you're like me, but when I see these figures, on the one hand, I'm just shaking my head all the time and thinking, like, why is this message not getting through? And then on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, actually, it's quite a big opportunity for us to make a big impact and look at it from a positive sense. I mean, how are you sort of more glass half full or glass half empty?
No, I definitely see it as an opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't know why with slips and falls, people are often more reactive than proactive. And when I say that, like if you talk to any customer or client that, you know, we typically work with, for whatever reason, slips and falls is just kind of like part of life. And people are, oh, it happens. Sometimes people don't report it because they're embarrassed. So, you know, really for every slip claim that happens, there's probably 4 or 5 that we didn't even know that led to that could have been that near miss, and something could have been done about it. So I'm always looking for those opportunities to be more proactive. And I really think while the nuclear verdicts are bad, I think it's going to open people's eyes a little bit more. And that might be that aha moment that they need to realize and start reacting before they get to that point that a loss has actually occurred. Yeah. So I'm always looking to help beforehand. And we do have a lot of customers that are at that stage of the game where they're really looking to drive their losses down before something major happens.
Yeah. I think we've seen a change in the criminal sentencing guidelines for health and safety criminal offences a few years ago. So since then we've seen many £1 million plus criminal fines levied on companies, and we've had several slip and fall fines that have been in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, whereas before 2016 they would have been, you know, £20,000 or something like that. So the most recent high profile one was in a supermarket chain called Tesco, which is kind of like similar to Walmart, I suppose. Yeah,
I've been there.
and yeah, a man slipped, broke his hip. I think he was about 90 years old, and they were I don't know what the civil claim was, but I'm sure there would have been a civil claim, and that probably would have been quite expensive because I imagine at 90 with a broken hip he's going to have a lot of medical bills.
Yes.
but they had a criminal fine of £733,000. So that is quite a significant amount of money, for
Yes.
any business. So that we are seeing a bit of pressure building from that side for us, which is good. When I mean, I fully agree that people kind of see this as a inevitability, and it's something that we're trying to shift the perception of. Where do you see the biggest challenges around, where people kind of get it wrong or don't get it right, if you know what I mean? So in other words, if you went into 100 clients, would you find a commonality among those 100 where actually there are 2 or 3 key areas that they all seem to not be doing as well as they might?
Yeah, honestly, one of the biggest things I see up front is nobody has a program in place. So, you really have to start and have to have a way to look and address an overall process. And when I say program, it could be like a lockout tagout program or like a material handling program, and actually have defined roles for those key stakeholders within an organization. And it doesn't have to be a super robust process, because depending on the size of your business, you're not going to have this massive plan. But having those guidelines in place on who's responsible for what, and how they're responsible, from facilities or maintenance to housekeeping to an employee coming in on a snowy day. Like, what are your responsibilities and what are your factors? And you can't really, when you have guests to your facilities or invitees, it's a little bit different, so you can't really corral what they're doing. But having a policy in place for those people that are protecting those areas that are going to be utilized by your guests are very important. So really, that's probably one of the key things that I noticed up front is, the program. The other thing when we talk about cleaning and housekeeping is really how those programs are established, the chemicals that are being used, and the knowledge of those people using the equipment and chemicals is truly another gap or breakdown in the process.
Yeah.
So 2 things that I'd identify would really be those.
Yeah, I'm involved. I'm a member of a group called the UK Slip Resistance Group. So we're kind of the industry association of slip and fall geeks like you and I. And we do guidance documents, and we stipulate how the slip testing using the pendulum must be done, and so on and so forth. And one of the things we're working on at the moment, in fact, I had a meeting about it this week, is some guidance on cleaning, because I see that is a huge area where people just get it so wrong so often. And actually, if you think about it, every floor is being cleaned, if not daily, then once a week or whatever. But most floors are being cleaned every day, and cleaning can be the difference between a floor being very safe, very unsafe. And therefore, if you're going to do it every day anyway, why not do it a bit more effectively? But people just don't really understand what effective means.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so many different components in a cleaning program that really affect the way you truly have a clean floor. And it's based on the contaminant too. So whatever the contaminant is within your facility, you could be different in a restaurant to a manufacturing facility. You have to adjust to that contaminant. And it could be a dry contaminant too. Oftentimes we see that where simple dry mopping could help from a slip and fall standpoint. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into it. And really, that's part of what we do going in. On the last slide that I showed, our consulting model is really truly to understand at first where that customer is at, like that fact finding. Then we really look at that, like the analysis of, okay, what's truly causing it? And that gets most of the times into that cleaning and the housekeeping aspect of it. And then only then do we really start providing and helping with that solutioning stage of it. Because until you understand truly what's happening, you can't really move forward with it.
Yeah. It's interesting because another interview I've done with a guy called Richard McNamara in Ireland, who's got a similar business to mine, and we were talking about how there's this one of the misperceptions is that slips and falls are kind of simple or easy, and actually they kind of are, but then and then you think, well, the control measures are kind of simple and easy. Well, actually they are, but then when you get into it, sitting behind all of that there's a huge amount of detail and areas that you can go wrong. So actually, it's a lot more complicated than people perceive it to be. And I think that's one of the big challenges as well. People kind of think it's easy. Oh, well, as long as we clean, we're okay. But they don't, there's a huge amount of depth behind cleaning. And so, yeah, we've got to try and get through to people and cut through some of that sort of superficiality, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you look at slips and falls, I do say that too, exactly pretty much what you said. It's complicated, but easy at the same time. So we don't want to overcomplicate it. But if you truly look at where the exposures are coming from, I mean, you really have to look at it as a multifactorial approach, right? You have to look at it from like the walking surfaces, the footwear, the contaminants, cleaning aspects of it. And even the perception of the folks, it could be an employee or it can be a guest, because how they perceive that area can also affect really the slipperiness of it. So that really speaks to what you're talking about on how it can be complex, but at the same time, we could just break it down and make it pretty easy.
Yeah. The perception issue is interesting from the victim, for want of a better term, the person who falls, because I see huge amount of, I would say I see many more accidents and injuries on surfaces that people expect to be slip resistant because they have a texture to them or whatever, than on surfaces like a shiny marble where people kind of expect it to be slippery because they then take more care. And so it's kind of, again, bringing the cleaning back in. You have these textured floors. People look at them, they look textured, they expect them to be safe, but if they're not cleaned and maintained effectively, they can become just as slippery. Whereas it's like in the leisure, I don't know if you do many leisure clients like swimming pools and health clubs, but the data that I've always seen, year after year, is that there are more accidents in the changing rooms than on the poolside, because people on the poolsides take care because they know it's wet, and then they step into the locker room and they sort of turn their brain off for some reason, even though they're covered in a towel and they're dripping with water onto the floor, and then they have an accident.
Yeah, that's actually, I just was out at a customer site looking in like the spa area and certain other areas because they were having some issues within that. So it's amazing how when people perceive things differently, they'll change their gait to kind of address that level of perception of the flooring. But also on top of that too, we actually, part of what we do when we're working with a customer is so Liberty Mutual had up until about 2016 timeframe, I guess, we had a research institute, and there was a lot of history, lots and lots of history involved with slips and falls research, going back to even looking at what you're talking about, the perception. So we actually had some force plates where we would look at how people would walk. We'd put them in harnesses and then gauge when their heel slips, also when their toe would slip. And we had cameras underneath that were able to record it. So it was actually a lot of scientific data that went into our references and research that we have, and looking at why people perceive it the way it is. And then some of what we did in 2014, 2015, we actually created a slipperiness perception survey where it's evidence-based, looking at, we started with the restaurant industry, and basically we had employees provide us feedback on where they perceive a level of slipperiness, and then we went out and tested that flooring to gauge where the slip resistant values were within there. Part of what we do, we use a slip test Mark 3B as our tribometer, and so it's different than the pendulum. And one of the things that we use is a slip resistant value. So just so we're talking the same terms. And when we look at that range, it truly did correlate to where the perceived slipperiness was from that employee. So we were able to then come up with a set of questions that we actually send out prior to we're on site, prior to we going on site, that kind of helps us gauge where we need to focus when we get on site. And that feedback back to the employees and the customer, it's proven to be pretty instrumental in getting them to be a little bit more proactive. So it's interesting though.
Yeah, whenever you like in sales, I know you don't do sales, but if you're having a sales conversation with somebody, funny enough, I've got somebody coming on the podcast soon who is a sales expert, and he is a big advocate for this term called buyer safety, so making the buyer feel safer with you than without you. So it's tangentially interesting from a safety and risk perspective. But one of the things that serves you well is to try and get the potential buyer to give you their thoughts and their numbers, and because they won't disagree with their own numbers. If they believe something's true, then they'll stick with that. So that kind of survey is a great way of doing that, because if they tell you something, that's their perception, and that perception is reality, right? And so if you can say, well, the science backs you up, let's do something about it, because they've identified the problem themselves, they're going to be much more keen to actually do something, I'd have thought.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, I mean, when we're looking at that approach, that's kind of where we're trying to go with our assessment process, to understand where the risk is, and then really explain, because sometimes too, with what we do, we don't always have direct access to the buyer. So our person that we're working with may have to then take the information that we provide them and sell it themselves. So in a way, we do have to be a salesperson for our customer and help them provide that feedback to risk management or the CEO of a company. It just depends on the customer that we work with. Sometimes we have the CEO's direct ear, sometimes we don't. So we do a lot of balancing in what we do as a consultant.
Yeah. So on the slip testing then, obviously different tests are used in different countries and whatever, but interested to know what sort of percentage of buildings would you say, get regular slip testing, or have even ever had a slip test, whatever test that would be in the States?
It's not widely used. I will say from a forensic standpoint, which we don't do as a consultant, we're really on the front, but the forensics engineers that go out after a claim has occurred, they use it quite often, right, to be able to support and back their facts and finding. But unless a customer has really partnered with somebody that is familiar with a tribometer and has that in their tools, really, I don't think many do have that. There are some larger companies that have taken it upon themselves to really work that in, like Disney, for instance. I know within their health and safety program, they do use tribometers, and they do really look at the health and safety of their guests. Because, I mean, think about Disney and what they do. They do safety well. And really, when they're moving forward with it, I think that's one thing that they do use. So some larger customers do, but by far, I don't think it's a common trend.
Yeah, similar here. I mean, this isn't a scientific measure, but I did a poll on LinkedIn, and I think there are about 600 respondents. So it's a decent sample size, and about 2/3 of people, just under 70% of people, had either slipped over themselves or somebody in their close family or friends had slipped over. So in other words, a large proportion of people have had a slip and fall, but only about, I think, 11% of buildings had ever had a slip test. So there's a big mismatch.
That is a big mismatch.
Yeah, and yeah, it shows you perhaps again what some of the problems. Going back to the slides, I don't know if you want me to bring this back up or just chat it through, but you had a really interesting case study there, and I think one of the questions that I always get asked is around. Well, there are two things that people really want to know around slips and falls from a customer perspective. One is, will it help me defend the claim if I do something, or if I don't do something, conversely? And two, what will it mean in terms of my insurance premium? And I'm not going to ask you to because you and I both know that there isn't a direct correlation, between doing something and your premium necessarily. There's a trend analysis over time and whatever, but in terms of some of the other questions, it's around what are the savings and what are the benefits, and you had this case study which showed kind of where you've been proactively working with somebody and you've managed to save them quite a lot of money, I think.
Yep. And really, so you ask about like how, when we partner with a customer, really what the true savings are. And obviously cost of a loss, right? So not having the loss and saving those dollars is really where we're trying to drive through, and ultimately going back to helping people live safer, more secure lives. So people leave the same way they came to your facility is really what we're trying to have that impact. But within this case study, so the slip and fall claims within a year time frame was almost $500,000 in 1 year. And honestly, right now that's kind of on the low end because of those nuclear verdicts that are happening. And it led to the employer led to about 3,000 or so lost work days. So basically for here, that's the employee is not at work. And so that's pretty significant, right? So, think about all the dollars behind that outside of that 500,000 that you have to backfill an employee hired temporary. So really look at the additional costs, about close to $1 million, right? 900,000. But we were able to work with them and kind of look where they're at. They were placing a lot of different things on the floors, right? So it's not the traditional like slip and fall. It's more of like a trip and fall. So they were looking at palleting on floors, looking at potential leaking fluids from equipment. So, how they went about cleaning and the simple clean as you go policy implemented, and really pre-shift inspections. So the supervisor and also the employees were tasked with making a pre-trip or pre-shift inspection. And then also we were able to work with them on the return to work. So getting those employees back into work in a faster manner, and finding jobs that they can actually do while they were in the recovery process. Really all that helped with a reduction in 50% of the slips and falls claims, 90% reduction in lost days over a 5-year period. And then if you really add up the total cost of it, it's 1.2 million in total savings for the insured. And if you look at that, that 1.2 million, but if you kind of equate that back to, something that they do. So if it's a part that they sell, and I don't know, if they're selling a part for $100, how many more parts can you sell by keeping your employees safe? And really, we try to look to do that. And that case study is just one of many. Another case study that I'm really impressed about is we utilize prevention through design, and it was in the financial industry working with a bank, and they really wanted to redesign their not only environment but experience for customers that came in. And we truly help them come up with a process where now they have design guides set up. So every time they build a new or remodel a new facility, they're actually designing out the risk factors before it happens. So part of it was testing on the floor surfaces and helping them come up with the floor surfaces that would be best in the environment, and looking at the people that will be coming into the facilities. As we have an aging population, and most of the people that are coming in are still in that aging population. We really look to see, lighting as well. So really, once again, that multifactorial approach in what we did. And, over the course of time, it's hard to say how much money we saved in that process, but just think of the losses and the injuries that aren't there. And that to me is like one of the best examples of where we could have an impact, is that prevention stage of it and designing it out before it even happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I sort of co-organized a roundtable, probably, it feels like not long ago, but it was actually, before the pandemic started, so a couple of years ago now. It shows how the world changes, that doesn't feel very long ago. And it was kind of, we had some insurers, we had some health and safety directors, we had some brokers and lawyers, whatever. And we started talking a lot about, it was health and safety broadly, not slips and falls. We were talking about, the costs of this and the investment case in that, and so on and so forth. And halfway through, somebody said, hold on a second, we're sitting here talking about pounds and shillings, and actually we're forgetting the important piece here, which is we're keeping people safe. And actually, shouldn't we be focusing on that? And you can't put a cost on that. It's funny how we sometimes we talk a lot about return on investment, but actually we can overlook the fact that this is the biggest cause of people getting hurt, and don't we want to stop people getting hurt?
Yep. Yeah, and that's truly, I mean, that's my passion. And as I said before, that's kind of why I went this route that I did. And being able to affect people and help people and, make sure that they're safe and they go home. I'll tell you, my family as a whole, I mean, I practice what I preach, and sometimes they get annoyed with me when I'm out, because if I see something and I know somebody's going to get hurt, I'll actually go up to a maitre d', or I'll go up to, somebody and say, hey, just so you know, there's a puddle over here, or somebody might trip on that, just to try to prevent that injury from occurring, because I know something's going to happen. And they just kind of roll their eyes like, okay, can you shut it off? I'm like, no, because I live and breathe it, and it's what I do, and I truly have a passion for it.
That's why I have such bad posture, because I'm always looking downwards at the floor to see how clean or how wet the floor is. Something I've been working on is getting my posture better. But no, I mean, it's the same for me. My goal is to reduce the number of these accidents by 500,000. That's kind of the big goal that I have set for myself. And there's a long way to go, but it's achievable, because there's so many of the accidents that we can eliminate. And as we said earlier, there are simple things and effective things that can be done. But I think what's really come out of what you've said, and it's something that I talk about a lot, is it's got to be holistic. You've got to be looking at all of these factors. It's not just we've got an anti-slip floor, or we've got footwear, or we've got a cleaning company. Well, that doesn't cut it. You need to be looking at all of these things and taking steps to reduce the risk across the board.
Yes, I completely agree. And really, until companies get to that approach where it becomes a sustainable piece of their operation, we're going to continue to see a cycle where they'll hit on it, they'll reduce it for a period of time, maybe a year, and then it'll spike back up again. But until they really look at that holistic approach, where they're looking at the multifactorial approach, where they're looking at the behaviors, the science behind it, we won't see a change. And my goal over the course of the time that I'm here is to really try to have that impact and get people to understand why slips and falls is so important. It's a leading loss driver, and until people realize that it is something that we need to change, it's not a distraction. It's not somebody just looking at their phone and realizing what they're doing. It's not just cause. It doesn't happen just cause.
Or somebody wearing high heels. Of course she slipped over, or he slipped over wearing high heels. Well, no, it's not as simple as that.
No, and it isn't. And I don't know. So until I could get to the point where when I see somebody and I could get them to understand where I'm coming from, I think each person I touch will hopefully take a snippet and change the way they feel, and then start having that discussion. So between you and I and everybody else with this passion, if we just affect one person each day, I think we could start changing things here and there.
Definitely. And that's a great way of wrapping this up. I think I couldn't have put it much better than that. Have you got any plugs or links or websites or anything like that you'd like to share? Particularly, I guess, if anybody's in the States, and if they're a client of yours, and want to get some help, but anything else you'd like to share, please go ahead.
Yeah, so really, when we're looking at it, Liberty Mutual does have some information out, and a lot of people look at Liberty Mutual and they see the personal lines insurance, but we do have the whole commercial side of business. And we provide industry insights on our webpage, and I could get you that, and you could attach it to the website. And in there's various topics, various industries, and it's all free content. So if anybody's looking for something, they could go ahead and jump on there and reach out. Also, I don't know if any of our customers are on here or any maybe potential future customers, but if you're looking for help within your business, first of all, reach out to your risk manager and your broker if you have that, to see how we can partner with Liberty Mutual, or feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd be more than willing to have a discussion and kind of help you get to where you need to go.
Perfect. And when we put this out on, and publicize it on LinkedIn and stuff, I'll tag you, and so people can find you on there. And any links, just fire them across, and I'll stick them into the show notes.
Excellent.
Well, thanks so much, Amber. Really enjoyed it. I might have to have you back on another time, because I'm sure we could talk for hours about this.
I'm sure I'd be happy to. I'm enjoying every minute of this.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's great. But we'll conscious of time, so we'll call that a day for today. But
Okay.
I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and the case studies and how you guys are approaching it. I think it's refreshing for me to see the dedication within the insurance market, because I don't tend to see as much of that as I alluded to over here. So let's hope that we can maybe inspire some insurers to do more over here as well.
I think so too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for listening. Join us again on the podcast. We'll be back next week with another great guest. If you enjoyed this, if you got some value from it, please do hit subscribe. Please do like us on social media. We love being liked. And hit subscribe, and give us a review. Reviews are always great, because that helps more people to learn about the podcast and to learn about this big issue of slips and falls, which, as Amber and I discussed, is one that deserves more attention. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it, Christian. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.
Good.